Hi everyone. We thought today we would share a bit about some of our own story of how we came to faith, a bit of our heritage, because we have quite different backgrounds spiritually. And we thought that would be interesting for you, and maybe you'll relate to one of our stories, and that would be an encouragement for you as you think about living as a missionary. So I think ladies first. So
Okay.
why don't you share a bit?
Okay, so I come from a deeply Christian background. So my parents actually became Christians in college, but then have since then been super involved in church life. They were, when I was born, so I'm not, yeah, early 70s, they were really involved. They were lay leaders in a church plant before it was even called a church plant, and they saw phenomenal things. Between sort of alcoholics, drug addicts becoming Christians, the church growing hugely, loads of signs and wonders, amazing things happen. And then they had a big house, and they would always be inviting people back to that house. So whether it was just for a meal, so there's always people around our dinner table, people we could learn from, all sorts of stories going on. They would employ homeless people to come and work in their backyard, to come and try and give them money. That whenever missionaries came back on furlough, they would come and stay in our home, so we got to hear all those first-hand stories of what God was doing in different cultures. We had missionary kids come and live with us while they got a proper English education. So it was a dynamic household, Bible studies going on, just lots and lots and lots of people in and through the home, and so we just got to relate to all sorts of different people, got to soak that in. But it wasn't really till university that I had to make my own decision. Okay, am I going to carry on with this, or am I going to do my own thing? But I thought, I've seen and experienced so much. I know this is true. I know this is totally worth devoting my life to. But going back through the generations as well, there's been generations and generations of just Christian heritage. So I've even got a show and tell. I've got this photo. Elizabeth Fry is her name, and she was a huge prison reformer in the 1800s. And in a day when women didn't have the vote, they weren't listened to, really. They were supposed to be a good housewife, and that was it. But she was incredibly influential in politics of the day, particularly when it related to prison reform and how prisoners were treated. And so much so that she was the first woman ever to be on the back of a British £5 note. So she is, I can't remember how many greats, grandmother. And then there's another like great grandmother, Elizabeth Gurney, who had this big house. And to think of whatever that, I've forgotten that TV show now that's super popular, but anyway.
Downton Abbey.
Think Downton Abbey. Big house like that with lots of servants, big grounds, stuff like that. So she was.
And her name was?
Her name was Hannah.
Hannah, you said Elizabeth, I was just checking.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Hannah Gurney. So that's who I'm named after. And she prayed a prayer, which is actually framed inside that house right now. She prayed a prayer that the house and all the people in the house would be used to the glory of God. And so pretty much all the servants went onto the mission field, and the house today is All Nations Bible College, which is where people are trained and sent out to go and be on mission all over the place. So that is hugely in my roots, in my DNA, about being on mission, about making a difference.
So I come from quite a different sort of background. So I wasn't raised in a Christian home, and when I was about 15, I was quite a naughty teenager. I know, shocking. But I actually came to faith over one summer, and probably the pivotal thing for me was a family who lived near us, who were wonderful Christians, and they really loved our family well. And they suggested to my mum that she sent her naughty teenage son to a camp, and it was for like 15 to 18-year-old boys, and we did loads of crazy outdoors activities. But it was in that environment I was watching these leaders who were perhaps, say, 10 years older than me, and they had something I wanted. And it wasn't just a kind of cool thing. It was what I now say, obviously, is that they had the Holy Spirit and they were committed to Christ. And so that was one half, and the other half was actually they did these little talks at night, and it was listening to the evidence for the resurrection. So in that kind of at an intellectual level, I found that really convincing. So those were the two pieces that helped me come to faith. I was discipled at school, and for me, probably the pivotal thing that happened in my life, obviously God did lots of good things along the way, but perhaps the most interesting story was when I was 21, I spent a long summer in South Africa working with a Christian organisation called African Enterprise. And this was when 1990, the year Mandela was released from prison, so apartheid still in force, very, very divided, broken culture. And this organisation had started out doing evangelism to the cities of Africa, had developed, so it had a beautiful base where they had this awesome community going on there, great Bible teaching, loved the word, doing lots of missions and evangelism. They were doing tons of social action, caring for the poor. I can remember regularly we'd go into townships and literally rebuilding mud huts for widows whose homes had been half washed away in the rain. They were, at the time, South Africa was the most violent non-war zone in the world. And so they were going to refugee camps doing ministry, and we got to join with that. It was the place where I first saw the supernatural happen. So I can remember being with a wonderful Indian evangelist in primarily an Indian community in Durban, and seeing in this ministry weekend, and lots of people coming in from a Hindu background and seeing demons manifest as people cut off the strings which they'd made their vows to the Hindu gods with. And the first healing I ever saw was someone about 5 feet away from me being prayed for that night, a young woman whose leg was about 4 or 5 inches shorter than the other, and it grew. And her family, who weren't Christians, all going crazy, and I'm watching it. And I tell you, moments like that change your operative theology pretty rapidly. Also, this African Enterprise was secretly, behind the scenes, they facilitated the peace process between the ANC and the white government at that time. And so they had this key role in the political arena. And so it's this holistic view of the power of the gospel, the difference that Jesus makes transforming society. So it's not just personal evangelism, as vital as that is, but it was seeing every part of humanity and of culture being reached. The kingdom expands in all those areas. And I felt the Lord say to me, go and do this in the West. And that call still grips me, and it's over my heart. It's certainly not fulfilled. But I believe that's part of my personal calling, but also at many levels it's part of our calling, that we live lives like that.
So we always love to end with a question, and each of us have stories, all sorts of little stories, I'm sure, within the bigger narrative of our journey so far. But for you, as you look back, what are you grateful for on your spiritual journey? It's part of your story, even if at the time maybe it wasn't so good. But yeah, just think, okay, what's God done, and what are you really grateful for?
And if you want to share that publicly, then we'd love to hear that. Please write it below in the comment section, or as always, you can all shoot us a note via the Dandelion Resourcing website. And thanks so much for watching.